Thanks to everyone on this Zoom call and on Facebook Live for joining us. We're now less than 3 weeks from the Democratic primary, which is on June 23rd. Many of you are going to vote by mail, and I hope we'll talk about that process as we go through. And many are going to vote early too. I hope we have voters on this call, as well as others who can vote in November but can't vote in the June election. There may be people who are presently, only people who are presently registered Democrats can vote on June 23rd. But the goal here is to have as much participation as possible. We want to bring people together in this district. That's the way to move forward. The stakes for this election could not be higher. The coronavirus pandemic has shown us all just how much leadership matters. With Lee Zeldin and his master, Donald Trump, in charge, we lack that leadership in the country, and it set us back tremendously. Zeldin fights more for Trump's agenda than he does for his constituents, and that's why we need a change in November. So why is 2020 going to be different than 2018? It starts with Lee Zeldin himself. Zeldin has wrapped himself around Donald Trump, and he's become even more hyper-partisan this term than he was before. And he's doing it at the expense of the people here on Long Island. Some glaring examples include his lack of support to repeal the SALT cap. He voted against repeal twice. His vote against prescription drug pricing reform last December. And while he said that's what he wanted to do when there was a vote on the table to actually have pricing reform, he voted against it. And then most recently, his vote against the HEROES Act that I hope we get to talk about. He voted against the repeal of the SALT cap. He voted against $49 billion earmarked to states hardest hit by coronavirus, including our own New York. And he voted against billions of dollars for local governments, which are desperately needed. We can't have that in our representative. Peter King, neighboring Republican, voted yes, and Zeldin voted no, and we've got to hold them responsible. And then Zeldin was silent when Mitch McConnell said New York should declare bankruptcy before getting federal aid. You can't be silent about that. This is an attack on our state. When we're attacked, we fight back. And that's what representative government is all about. And Zeldin, while he will sometimes say he's for us, the one he never says anything bad about is not his own constituents. It's Donald Trump. He never says anything bad about him. When Trump said, go drink disinfectant, Zeldin didn't say a word. Zeldin ghosts his own constituents. He never meets with them, never answers their questions, never holds himself accountable. Zeldin's last true town hall was in April 2017. That's not the congressman I'm going to be. I've proven that again and again through this campaign. And when we launched over a year ago, we had huge presence, and I was there facing the people. And since then, I've crisscrossed the district. I spent the last summer and fall attending fire department barbecues in just about every street festival and feast that I could find. And the reason I was there was to meet voters, to talk to them and build relationships. That is what a good representative does. I don't just say, I'm here for you. I'm actually with you and with you in presence. And that's what I'm trying to do. Last September, I said, we're going to start a series of monthly town halls. And that's what you're joining today. This is the 10th one. I said we'd do 10. I think actually we'll do 11 before the primary. These are supposed to be bipartisan events. I will take questions from anybody. By example, in January, there was a guy, a constituent in the front row wearing a red MAGA hat. And I called on him to ask a question. I will call on anybody. That's the way you're supposed to do this. We've been everywhere in New York One, targeting communities that are often ignored. We brought in a diverse crowd in working class quorum in February. It was great to see really the diverse constituency. That's what we want to do at all of our events if possible. We have a Latino organizer on staff. We have a second language audio in Spanish on this town hall. At least I hope we do.
We actually don't have that for this town hall. We had it on our last one.
Okay, I'm sorry, and we'll have it on the next one. This is our fourth virtual get-together. When coronavirus hit, we moved the regular town halls indoors, online. This is, as I said, the fourth one, and I appreciate people taking time out of their evenings to listen and to ask questions. You're going to ask the questions tonight. It's just me to answer. Please ask what's on your mind, and I'm going to do my best to answer. And if I don't get to it tonight, I will get to it later. There are different ways you can ask. You can send them in by email. You can send them in if you email to campaign@parigershon.com. You can send them in with the chat button on this Zoom call. And we will get to the questions. My team is here to organize them. Hannah, my campaign manager, who you see, is going to read the questions. That's the format that we've used before. I hope at the end of the day, you see, I'm the only candidate in this race who's engaging with voters on a constant basis. The support that my campaign has is reflective of that. I know this district. I know the people. I know what they want in their representative in Washington. And I know that because I've been listening to them for 3 years. They want someone who's going to fight for them and be a leader for them. And that's why I want to go to Congress, to do just that. One more comment before I start. It's a story that I like to begin these town halls with. When I was 10, I attended a town hall with my congressman, Ed Koch, in New York City. I got called on to ask a question. I raised my hand. He thought it was cute to pick a 10-year-old. And I asked him about a candy store across the street from my school that was charging 15 cents for 10-cent candy. And I didn't understand what was happening. And I said, asked the store, how do you do that? And they said, it's tax. And I said, how can that be tax? It's not the right price. And I didn't get an answer from the store, but Mr. Koch said he would look into it. He didn't know either. A few weeks later, I went back to the candy store and they had reduced their price to 11 cents. And I said, what happened? And they said 1 cent sales tax, which was rounding. That's the impact that a town hall can have, where you speak to your elected representative, and even if he can't answer your question, he can see to it that he finds the person who can take action and see to it that something gets done fairly. I'd like to be able to serve, whether it be the 10-year-olds or the 70-year-olds or anybody in the middle in this district. That's why I'm running, and that's why at the end of this, I'm going to ask you for your votes. But with that, I thank you for listening, and why don't we open it up to questions?
Okay, so this first question was submitted beforehand from Carl. He emailed us. Actually, this is through our submission form. He asks the question, can you explain what a town hall is?
Carl, thank you for that question. It's a good one. I alluded to it a little bit in my opening. A town hall is an opportunity to engage with your elected representative or your would-be elected representative and ask questions and speak what's on your mind. It's supposed to be a free, in my mind at least, a free exchange of ideas, a chance to interact and be heard. If you elect a leader, you want to know that that leader is there for you and that you have access to him. And a town hall gives you that. My goal as a congressman is to be able to hold live town halls. Hopefully we will be through the coronavirus issues and be able to interact in large groups again. But however we do it, to do it in different regions of the district like we were doing before. We had a town hall in Shirley, in Kings Park, in Patchogue, in Riverhead, we were supposed to have one in Bellport. We did one in Coram, we did one in East Hampton. We were going to do one in Stony Brook. Being able to go to all of these locations and not have to travel far, to have your congressman there for you locally is what a town hall, the opportunity a town hall gives people. And it's supposed to be the exchange for the interaction of ideas.
Great. Okay, so this next question is from Stephen. It's from the Q&A on Zoom. Do you see a downside to repealing the SALT tax cap?
Hi, thank you, Stephen. Before I get to that, I see Dina is raising her hand. I think the way we're doing this is to use the chat function to ask the questions instead of raising hands. And I think we can also answer questions in the Q&A section. Probably better to go that way. And we will try to get your questions in. So, Stephen, was it Stephen, Hannah?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Stephen, your question was, do I see a downside to the repeal of the SALT cap? In the abstract, if all you did was repeal the SALT cap and leave everything else as it is, it would mean less money coming in for the federal government. The reason the SALT cap got put in place in the first place was because the Republicans who were implementing the 2017 cap wanted to cut taxes for corporations and for the most wealthy people in America. And to do that, they lost so much revenue, they needed to fill it from somewhere else. And the way they decided to fill it was to put a limit on the tax deductions for people who live in the high tax state and local tax states. And that crushed big states like New York and California. And the Republicans really didn't care because these are Democratic states that did not vote for Donald Trump and tend to have Democratic senators and most of the House delegation. But it's blatantly unfair. It's double taxation to the people who live in these states. I do think we should repeal it, and I think we will have to find alternate revenue. The bill that was before the House in December that actually passed the House but was not taken up by the Senate increased taxes to the people in the highest bracket to the level that it was at before the 2017 changes. That was a matter of fairness. It was an exchange. And I certainly think that's a fair way to do it. Lee Zeldin voted against that change. And I think we need to hold him accountable for it. And since I used that word, I actually want to add that thought in. I missed it. The other thing that's critical in the last answer, the other thing that's critical about town halls is it's a real chance for you, the voter, to hold your elected representative accountable. If you don't like what he's doing or she's doing, you can speak out at a town hall. This is your best chance to do it and to have your voice heard.
Great. So we've had several people on Zoom, and then we also had several people send this question in beforehand, so I figure it's a good time to ask it. What are your thoughts on opening the economy, Pari?
That's a great question. All the people who asked it. And the answer is complicated. And I'd like to say I'm for it. And obviously I am for it. We have to open the economy. Donald Trump is right when he says Americans and people in general are not meant to be locked up in cages of their houses and maybe gilded cages, but they're still enclosures. We need to go out and interact with people, and we want to work. We want to be productive. That's the American way. So we need to find a way to get back there, and we need to do it as quickly as we can while still being safe. Governor Cuomo is doing a great job of leading New York's recovery efforts. We are opening up the economy in phases when we can show that it's safe for people to go out. As the number of new cases and hospitalizations decline sufficiently over a period of time, then we start. And when we show phase one works, we go to the future phases. But that way, we're also setting up testing and tracing, because the worst thing that can happen is to open up the economy and open up our society and then see people get sick, fill up the hospitals, and then we need to shut it down to flatten the curve again. We must make sure that doesn't happen. And I feel great about the way we're approaching it in New York, and I wish we were doing that in other parts of the country. We're going to open the economy. We're going to get phase four before all that long, and people will find ways to even get to sporting events. I'm a huge Met fan, and I can't wait to see baseball played again. But before we can do all that, we also have to acknowledge that there'll be adjustments. We're going to wear masks outside when we're interacting with other people, not to protect ourselves, but to protect them. It's critical that we wear masks. And it hurts me to see people going around proudly not wearing a mask. What they're saying is basically F you to their fellow human being. And that's just wrong. I don't care who you are.
The next question here maybe segments a little bit into that. Michael on Facebook is asking, what are your thoughts on protesters and business owners who ignore safety guidelines?
It's not good. Michael, thank you for that question. It's never good when people ignore safety guidelines. And there's a certain amount of sympathy that I have for them, to be honest, because the person who's supposed to set an example for the rest of us flaunts the fact that he doesn't wear a mask. And that is blatantly not good. When the President of the United States will not wear a mask in public, he's telling other people that it's okay for them to not wear a mask either. And I have a problem with that. So I think, yes, it's not right when businesses flaunt the rules and break them, and they should be corrected. I think it's important that our police and other officials make sure and enforce that the rules are followed and enforce them. But at the same time, we all need to set the right example. If I were here and with other people outside of me and my computer screen in this room, I would have a mask on. And we need to set the right example. That's what an elected official is there to do.
This next question is from Lisa on Zoom. When you are elected, Pari, what do you want to be the first 3 bills that are passed?
Oh, when I'm elected, there are a lot of things we need to do. And it's somewhat a function of where we are in the economy and in coronavirus, what passes before. But for the sake of the question, I'm going to assume that I'm elected and we have a Democratic Congress, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president, which means we will be able to legislate. Assuming we've not sent money to the needs, to the causes that are most in need, right now, I would plug that hole. So whatever holes are left hanging from this administration in terms of response to coronavirus, I think I'm going to focus on that first. And it really depends on where we are. But if people are getting sick again because we don't have enough testing, I would want to make sure we have the money for testing and contact tracing nationally at a federal program, to take the steps that we're not taking now, to get money to the states, to make sure the states don't go bankrupt. The states on the current pace are going to really be hurting, and we're going to need to fix that. So I think that's just a huge priority. But putting the coronavirus specific reactions aside, we're going to need a huge stimulus bill. Getting the economy moving again is not just putting a few people back to work and saying it's okay. It's getting new jobs created to replace the old jobs. And Michael, I think this was your question. The most important thing our government can do is set the tone for getting the investment in our country going again through stimulus. We can invest in clean energy, and that can really make a difference in this district. We can bring jobs here that are creating jobs in clean energy infrastructure or an R&D that relates to clean energy. And it's the potential for jobs that pay $40 an hour, union jobs, as opposed to the service sector jobs that we've lost. And the reality is it's going to take time for travel and leisure to get going, but we can find other ways to get people working. And we can focus on infrastructure as the priority and the tool for bringing employment back. The other thing I'd like to see is some reforms to make the system go better, and doing that is a priority. I've been asked this question many times, and I answer campaign finance reform, and I can't not answer that here. Our system's broken. People, campaign donors, have too much influence over the people who are supposed to be representing everybody. The Citizens United decision is probably the worst thing out there, because it allows super PACs to have undue influence, and really unlimited money can be contributed to a candidate. And you go around the campaign contribution limits. We have to fix that. We need to make sure that the people who are elected to government are truly there to represent people. So that's the other thing I'd really like to see accomplished. I think that's 3 answers. So why don't we go on to the next question?
Okay, this next question is from Nicole. Do you see schools changing permanently to incorporate distance learning for higher grades?
I sure hope not, Nicole, as long as it's exclusive. They're not exclusive. And thank you for the question. Distance learning has its role, and I wouldn't want to say we haven't improved anything as a result of this experience. But it's no substitute for in-person learning and the personal experiences between a teacher and their students. And we can talk about this and apply it to kindergarten, through grade school, through high school, or post-high school education. It's similar at all levels. I think there are ways that we can do better and reach more people faster with online education. And if we split up what we teach online and what we teach in person, we might even be able to give more personal attention when we're in the in-person phases. So I think there is room for us to learn from this experience. But the most important thing is that we get back to the old model of having a teacher being able to interact with their students and having the students be able to interact with each other. that human contact is part of education. And that's completely lost right now. Education is not purely technical, where you learn what's in a book and absorb what's in a lesson plan. It's also learning how you interact with your fellow human being. And we can't lose that. I hope that's a good answer. Thanks for the question.
All right, this next question is from Flo on Zoom. How do you feel, Pari, about creating federal mandates for PPE protocols to ensure the safety of frontline hospital personnel? And that's from Flo.
Thank you, Flo. Another great question. And it's funny because if you asked someone that question 3 months ago, they would not have known what PPE even was. It's an expression that we've unfortunately all learned about too well. Our first responders and the people on the front lines are doing such an important role as we get through this pandemic. And we've seen them risk their lives for the rest of us. And it's so important that we take care of them. And taking care of them includes getting them PPE, but it also includes paying them hazard pay for their work. There's so many things we need to do to take care of the people who are taking care of us. And I hope we walk away from this pandemic with a better understanding of the value of that part of our society. Our nurses do such an important role in what they do. Our hospital administrators do an important role. Just the whole hospital system was taxed by this pandemic, and our ability to get through it required the cooperation of everyone, but special sacrifices from people on the front lines. In one of the earlier town halls that we did online, I think in early April, we had a first responder, an ICU physician, with us to talk about his experiences. And I encourage anyone who's interested to listen to that on our website, because it really made an impression on me. And we need to make sure that the people who are putting their lives on the line understand that we respect them. And to go back to the question, they should have complete access to PPE on a priority basis. We need to make sure that we don't have gaps like we did before, whether that be relying on better domestic supply chains. That's part of it. I don't think getting rid of international supply chains is the right answer either. I think it's a mix. We can't rely 100% on any one source. But thank you for that question.
This next question is from Yira. Yira says, hello, I live in Kachog. What is your understanding of what the people in CD1 want in regard to offshore drilling and wind farms in the Atlantic Ocean? And what will be your position when further voting on allowing expansion of this development of alternative energy? That's from Yira.
Nira?
Yira.
Yira, thank you for the question, Yira. There are multiple parts to it, so I want to break it down. There is a real difference between offshore drilling and wind power. And I think most people in New York, one, don't want any part of offshore drilling in the Atlantic. And quite frankly, my view is offshore drilling on any of our coasts is a bad thing and should be stopped to the extent that it's being allowed at all. Lee Zeldin, by the way, voted, to his credit, against offshore drilling on the Atlantic. Not to his credit, he said it's okay to do it in certain other areas. That's not good. That's actually a little hypocritical by my book. If you're against offshore drilling, you really shouldn't want it anywhere. No one wants it in their backyard, so we should not have it, period. But wind, on the other hand, is an alternative source of energy that can produce power without burning fossil fuels. And I think it's a great development for how we transition off of fossil fuels and fight climate change. And I think the more we can do for wind power, the better. It's also a source of jobs here on Long Island. And I'd like to see us explore taking it to the next degree. The giant wind farms that we're talking about building require very large turbines, propellers on the wind to make the wind to make the wind power. And these turbines at the moment are manufactured away from here and have to be brought by boat in a very complicated and expensive process. We don't have domestic manufacturers of wind turbines yet. I think it's an industry we could actually look into developing in Long Island, or on Long Island in our sound, on the tip. We have the Deepwater port for it. So it's something to explore, and there are a lot of jobs if we can actually pull it off. So I think wind power has a lot of potential. Can't do it with wind alone. Solar power too is a power for the future, and part of how we transition away from fossil fuels and onto clean technology. We also need to develop batteries, which is something we can do in this district. And Stony Brook is a source of innovation, and the research that gets done there in clean energy is already looking into developing better battery technology. I think the federal government has a role promoting that, and the more money that we put into that R&D, the more wind power, solar power, and non-fossil fuel power that we'll be able to generate here in Long Island, and we can do it while we create a better economy. And to me, that's the perfect win for everybody.
This next question is from Janet. Janet says, I haven't heard anything about how COVID-19 has affected the detention camps along our border with Mexico, especially the children. Do you have any insights? That's from Janet.
Hi, Janet. Thank you for the question. And I'll share what I know and share some other thoughts. Last May, Lisa, my wife, and I went on a trip to the Arizona border to get as much of a look at what was going on there as we could, so that I'd be able to talk about it more intelligently. And unfortunately, they would not let us into the camps where people are being detained. So we didn't see that firsthand, but we did see the border, and we spent a lot of time with customs and immigration personnel as they explained their policy. And I think lots of changes are necessary. The Trump administration's policy of family separation 2 years ago was completely un-American, and it's mostly stopped, and that's a good thing. But there are still camps, there are still children who are exposed, and what the administration has been doing here, more so than before, is trying to push people out into other countries, back into Mexico, back to Honduras or Guatemala, where they came from, and doing it really behind closed doors. We don't know everything that's happening. It's not being made public, and that's certainly problematic. And there is not adequate testing there, and I can say that with pretty good knowledge, since there isn't adequate testing anywhere, and I don't see Trump getting testing it to the camps his priority, which means that people are probably being sent back to other countries while they are infected, and that's not right either. So I think it's a situation that really warrants better exploration. And I hope, if it's not dealt with before, that the new administration will take this much more seriously.
This next question is from Marvin. This was submitted earlier. Marvin, who is from Middle Island. How are you going to fix our infrastructure?
Well, thank you, Marvin, for the question. First answer to that, first thing that comes to mind is I am not personally going to fix it. The President of the United States made a comment, I alone can fix it. And I never would look at any complex problem that way. Infrastructure needs to be addressed. It's something that's important to all Americans, not only in this district, but certainly in this district. And we fix it with a team effort. We need the Congress to authorize money for infrastructure projects. And we need to have people put thought into what's smart infrastructure. So in this district, for example, we desperately need sewers in many areas. The nitrogen waste is a huge problem. We are too dense, and we have allowed our cesspools and septic to pollute our drinking water in our bays. And the only way we're going to fix that is with sewers where we can justify it, or with clean septic. And that kind of infrastructure should be a top priority for our government. Lee Zeldin, when he first got elected, said he would bring sewer money to Shirley and his area within 3 years, or 3 terms, or he should not be reelected. Well, we're there, and we don't have the infrastructure money. I would make it a priority that we fund infrastructure for sewers and also for clean energy infrastructure, as I talked about. We've got a desperate need for investment in this country, for real stimulus to make the economy start going again, because it's not going to do that on its own coming out of this pandemic. And the best way to do it is infrastructure investment. And it's not going to happen in 2020. It's going to need a new president and a new Senate to properly let the government do what the government is good at. And there's a role for private, there's a role for government, there's a role for working together. And that's the way I'd like to see us go forward. Again, it's a team effort. It's not me or I, it's us.
This next question, Pari, is coming from Zoom. And they ask you, or they say, I have been with you since the beginning, Pari, for your intelligence, passion, and availability. Please let us know why you should be our Democratic CD1 nominee over our other 3 choices.
Whose question was it? I'm sorry.
It says JHE. I think that's their initials. JHE.
JHE. Okay. Well, thank you, JHE. I'm not sure who you are. I probably would know you if I saw you, but there's a real important role of whoever wins this election, this primary. We need the candidate who's most able to beat Lee Zeldin. And Lee Zeldin is the problem. And whoever wins, I 100% pledge to get behind that person. But we also, as I said, need to pick the person most likely to get there. People have gotten to know me through this campaign, through events like these town halls. And that is the comfort level that we need to get our person elected. I have great ideas, so do the other candidates, for what we're going to do. But I have faced Zeldin before. I have brought people together in a national campaign and shown us a path that almost got us there. And we have what we need now to get us over the hump. There's one, and I said this in the opening, there's one big difference now between 2018 and 2020, and that's Lee Zeldin and Donald Trump. They are so linked together that now, more so than before, that Zeldin's fate is going to be Trump's fate. And I'm going to keep mentioning that. I'm in the position to do that. If people have not seen my new ad yet, I hope you'll see it over the next few days. It just went on TV today. But we talk about how we're going to hold Zeldin and Trump accountable. That is the campaign that's going to get us this seat back. This was a Democratic seat for 12 years, 6 terms before Zeldin got in. And there's no reason to think it's not going to be a Democratic seat going forward.
Okay, so this next question is from Frankie from East Setauket, who sent in earlier. With the current administration causing such division around the nation, in particular with common sense guidelines to follow, such as wearing a mask and social distancing, what could you do or say to influence people what could you do or say to influence people taking part in this very macho attitude and following such a divisive president? So what would you do to influence people who are supporting the divisive president? And that's from Frankie.
Well, Frankie, again, thank you for the question. The best thing I can do is follow the example of our governor, which is to say the president is wrong when appropriate. You can't let him set the example when the example he sets contradicts all kinds of common sense. We need to get people back to work and reinvigorate the economy, but we need to do it in an intelligent and safe way. The purpose of starting the economy up again is to make America work on a sustainable basis, not to make America work through November election day to get the president reelected. And that really bothers me in terms of what's happening now. And we need a congressman who will speak up when the president says something that's wrong. And I don't care if he's a Democrat or a Republican who's the president. If we get to February of next year and Joe Biden is president and he says the equivalent of Americans should drink disinfectant to protect themselves, I'm going to speak up. Or if Joe Biden says everything is okay, we no longer need the safety measures to protect us before we have a vaccine, I'm going to speak up because that's not okay. We need to follow our scientific advice. That's the reason we have scientists in our government, not just in Congress, but advising our congressmen and in lots of advisory roles and advising the administration. The scientists are there because they understand the facts and we need to follow their input. Be logical. And when you're not logical, you've got to call it out. I don't want to create civil unrest. And unfortunately, I think this president we have right now likes it. And he stirs the pot to get attention to himself. It's a poor way to govern, and it puts our nation at risk and our future at risk. We've got to appeal to the better nature of people who don't want to wear masks and coax them into wearing masks because it's better for everybody. I don't really know how you do it with the president who's not wearing a mask himself. When the leader is setting the wrong example, it's very, very difficult to get people in line. When we have a leader who does set the right example, then it gets easier. So that again is why this election in November is just so important. If we thought it was important before coronavirus, it's 3 to 4 times more important now. Our future as a country really is on the line. And the idea of dividing to get ahead is just really awful leadership.
Okay, this next question is from Shelley, and she is asking, can anything be done about the deer population explosion in Suffolk County? It's a big problem here.
Shelley, thank you for the question. I certainly know that. 2 days ago, I woke up to walk on my lawn, and there was a giant deer that was probably bigger than me with big antlers staring right at me. And he's not supposed to be here. And we see it everywhere. We see it on the roads. We see it affecting our farmers. We see it with people being infected by ticks and getting Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. We do have to get the deer under control. It's more the responsibility of our county and other government, but I think there's a federal role in all of this too, certainly in terms of education. People need to understand the risks that the deer carry and the importance of keeping the deer under control. It relates not just to you're not liking them, but to disease control, because they do spread through ticks, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and Lyme disease. And I'm sure most people on Long Island, even if they've not encountered Lyme disease themselves, they know someone who struggled with it. So it's a very serious problem.
This question is from Jordana. She sent in on Zoom. What are your thoughts of Trump threatening to defund the World Health Organization on the grounds of it helping China covering up the COVID-19 outbreak? That's from Jordana.
Georgiana, thank you for the question. And I have pretty strong feelings about this. The World Health Organization is here to protect us. We are in a global pandemic. Every single country, regardless of who's at fault or what they may have done to start this problem, we're all in it together now, and we've all got to find a way to recover from it together. A vaccine doesn't help one country, it helps all countries. And keeping the disease under control doesn't just help one country, it helps everyone. If the disease runs rampant in a country, things that occur as a result are famine. When people are starving, it creates not just a problem in that country, but there are lots of domino effects. So the World Health Organization is a unit that can bring people's thoughts and ideas and creative genius is I think an appropriate word here on how to deal with this disease and the effects of it, coronavirus, and prevention and treatment, all of that. And we need to do everything we can to keep them thriving, not to shut them down. This is not you don't deal with a pandemic as an individual country. You deal with it together. And Trump's actions really, again, threaten the world's ability to emerge. We have to do better than that. Did China have a role that do the wrong thing in the beginning? Yeah, they probably did. And we should hold China responsible for what they did wrong. But that's not the point when it comes to the World Health Organization. We need a strong World Health Organization if we're going to efficiently and effectively emerge from the crisis. So defunding them is the worst thing we can do.
This next question is from Karen from Smithtown, and she submitted this beforehand. Karen asks, what actions will you propose to help the unemployed and underemployed find new work post-pandemic?
Karen, thank you for the question, and it too is a very important one. We need to create jobs at a rapid clip right now. We need private industry to do it. We need our public sector to do it because so many of the jobs that are lost just don't come back overnight. And quite frankly, we're not done losing them. Airlines are just starting to lay people off, and other businesses are starting to lay people off. People are having problems making their rent payments. That's gonna follow to people having problems making their mortgage payments, and commercial property owners having problems making their mortgage payments. And you're going to see defaults and a cascading that will put more people out of work. So the need for the federal government to find ways to create new jobs cannot be understated. So how do we do that? We fund public works programs. We fund infrastructure. And I know I keep saying that, but you can't say that word enough because that is the best way to employ, for the federal government to employ people and contribute to our economy and make our country better. Here's another kind of infrastructure we need: rural broadband. What we've seen in this pandemic, when people are are unable to go to school, they're relying on their home internet now more than ever. Well, not everyone has access to the same level of home internet, and we need to level that playing field. And investing in that kind of infrastructure means jobs for people in New York, and elsewhere. The more ways we can find to put people to work and do something positive to make our country a better place, the more we're going to give our private industry a chance to catch up. And we can fund startup businesses, ideas in clean energy, R&D, and put people to work that way too. And there's a role for our private entrepreneurs who have good ideas and can employ people. And the government should probably look for ways to fund public-private partnerships too that way. We need to do everything we can to bring people back to work. And that, I think, is going to be the real focus of the 2021 to 22 House that I'm hoping to be part of.
This next question is from Ronnie, and they submitted this beforehand as well, before the town hall as well. Ronnie says, we need an independent voice in Washington and not someone who is the chief executive's water boy and enabler. Will you be that person, whether the president is a Republican or a Democrat?
Absolutely. It's hard to not be critical of this president, but that doesn't mean that when we have a Democratic president, we shouldn't be critical of him too, where appropriate. And Ronnie, that is a great question, because I'm happy you asked it, because it really allows me to talk about how important bipartisanship is in healing. One of the things that I like most about Joe Biden as a candidate is I think he's all about healing this country and trying to bring us back together. It's a great contrast from President Trump, who's all about dividing us as a nation and pitting Republicans versus Democrats. Biden's approach is we're all Americans, and I think that's a good thing. And to the extent he starts to deviate, I'll certainly call him out for it, because my approach is that we're all Americans. And I'm running to be New York One's representative, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. And if you do the right thing, I think you should be praised. If you do the wrong thing, I think you should be called out. Waterboy has never been anything anyone's accused me of being. I've always been known for speaking my mind, sometimes to my detriment. But I think overall it makes me a better person, and I think it will make me a better leader for this district. Before we go to the next question, I just want to point out we have 94 people on the Zoom call, and we have at least 30 people on Facebook, and I think that number is probably higher. That's the steady state number. So that's 125 people on a gorgeous Wednesday night. So thank you to everybody who's taking part. I appreciate your giving us this time. Hannah, do we still have a lot of questions here?
We just have a couple more, yeah.
Why don't we do another 15 minutes or so, go to 8:15, and I think that's probably good.
Okay, great. This next question is from Flo on Zoom. How can we use this pause to restart our economy in a greener manner?
Thank you, Flo. I talked about this a little bit, but you allow me to really make the point wholeheartedly. You can look at the pause one of two ways. You can look at it as an opportunity to make things better, or you can look at it as an opportunity to hopefully resume the status quo. And if you look at the way President Trump is handling this, he is relaxing a lot of the pollution rules, even as we speak, during this pandemic. He's saying the best way to recover is with a dirtier economy. And that is the opposite of what we should be doing. We should see the pause as a chance to really evaluate how we can make America a better society in the future, with investment in clean, green infrastructure. It's time. It's time to be back in the Paris Accords, but it's time for more than that. It's time to really put the government's full effort and the country's full effort into a green economy and show that it can work. We build jobs in a clean energy sector. Why not? Let's get it. It's a win-win for all of us.
This next question was sent in early as well. It's from John, who's in Southampton. John asks, given recent experience under the Trump administration, should Congress consider legislation to make clearer limitations on presidential authority, including in the area of executive privilege and the claimed authority to withhold information and testimony from Congress without regard to whether the president in 2021 is a Democrat or a Republican?
John, I'm so glad you asked that question, because that is such a high priority for for the next administration and for future administrations. This president has shown that in 1 minute he can destroy years of work and years of consensus building and policies that were established by Norm. He does an executive order and rips it up. And he's getting no oversight from the Congress because the Senate won't oversee him. The House impeached Trump, and the Senate, many of them saying, we know what he did is wrong, but we're not gonna convict him anyway. That creates a lawless president who uses executive authority to just override the will of Congress again and again and again. Well, Congress needs to pass laws that make sure very, very clearly that this can't happen another time. We need congressional oversight and subpoena power, regardless of who the president is, and where the president can't hide behind things. The president should have to disclose his taxes, regardless of what party he's from. Nobody would have thought of running for office and not disclosing their taxes. And Trump, oh, by the way, when he was running, didn't say, I'm not going to disclose my taxes. That's what he says now. He had this cockamamie story about being under audit and would disclose his taxes afterward. Well, there is no afterward. It was just a cockamamie story because this president thinks he's above the law. Just today, he's out saying that because Twitter put a fact check on his tweets, he's threatened to shut Twitter down. Well, he doesn't have the authority to do that. And I'm still a little bit scared that Congress could give him that authority by refusing to act. We need accountability in our government. That's what makes America a democracy. And we have to do this the right way. And I hope and pray that the next administration and the next Congress puts politics aside and does what's right for our country.
This next question is from Peter. Peter asks, a strong economy on Long Island is only attained through an active housing market. The first thing Trump did when he took office was to rescind an Obama HUD directive to lower the mortgage insurance premiums on FHA mortgages, which helped first-time buyers. Will you commit to pressing the Biden administration to get this done?
To get the incentive, the HUD incentive programs back. Yeah, absolutely. Peter, thank you for the question, because you raise a great point. Housing is one of the economic drivers for people in America. It's a security blanket. It's a way people start up their lives, the way families start up their lives. And we should make housing available to everybody. That's why these HUD programs were set up. And again, the president, with the swipe of a pen, undoes years and years of complicated legislation that was implemented and protections. We need to fix that, and we've got to get it done quickly.
All right. This next question comes from Angeline. Angeline asks, what is your view on STEM education in elementary schools? The focus is mostly on ELA and math. STEM promotes ELA and math skills. We need to promote the love of science from a younger age rather than wait till middle school onwards. The jobs of the future require skills that STEM subjects teach. That's from Angeline.
Angeline, thank you for the question and the comments. I agree with you. And just for people who don't know this about me, I grew up in a strong science background. My parents were not only doctors but medical researchers at universities, and I was a molecular biochemistry and biophysics major at Yale. So I have a strong science background, and I appreciate how important teaching science is for people from a young age onward. And I don't think you can really go too young in terms of how you interject it and into the curriculum. So much of the better paying part of the economy in the last decade and the foreseeable future is STEM related. So the sooner we introduce people to these skills, the more likely it is to take and have roots, and for us as a result to be able to put out competitive graduates ready to compete in the world economy. I think we need to focus on doing better there. Thank you.
This next question was from Facebook, from Janet. Janet Marie asks, what is your position on how to reduce mass shootings in our country?
Janet Marie, any position I have that will reduce mass shootings is a good, essential thing. This country would be so much better off if we did not have the gun violence that we have today. And I hope and pray that the next Congress makes the passage of gun safety laws a priority. I think most Americans would agree with everything I just said. Americans have the Second Amendment right to own a gun, and it's a right to firearms that I wouldn't want to take away. But that doesn't mean that we can't own firearms in a safe manner that protects all of society. There's a reason why we've passed laws for background checks. And I think it's Congress's duty to close the loopholes that allow people to get around the background checks and still buy firearms. There's no excuse for not doing it. Similarly, there's certain guns that there's no need to have in the civilian population, assault weapons, and we should put restrictions on them. The sale of assault weapons, why do we allow that here? We had a ban for many years that we allowed to expire. I think we should bring that back. And the way we accomplish this policy is, again, goes to one of my first answers in terms of the important legislation. We've got to get big money out of politics. The reason we haven't passed gun safety laws is not because America doesn't want it. It's because these lobbies, the gun lobby in particular, the NRA, funds candidates to get their positions across, and they have undue influence. And the NRA is not representing even the gun owners so much as they're representing the gun manufacturers. And we need to change that by passing election campaign reform. The ultimate goal though, is to reduce gun violence in America. And it's time in the 2021 Congress that we get it done.
Okay, this next question is from Susan. Susan says, student debt forgiveness, for or against, and why?
Susan, the question sounds so binary, and I want to say that I'm going to give a non-binary answer. I think there's a role for forgiving student debt in exchange for government service. There's a national need that we do something about the student debt crisis. People are graduating college in debt that they'll never be able to pay back. And it was bad before coronavirus and the unemployment that we're going to see now. And it's going to be much worse after coronavirus when we have to rebuild our economy at the same time. Massive amounts of student debt and rebuilding an economy don't go together. So we need to give people options that can get them debt relief and at the same time help us improve our economy. Encourage people to go into jobs like teaching and give them student debt relief for that, but not just wipe it out tomorrow, haphazard, with nothing in exchange. And that's not fair to the people who did come out of pocket and pay for their education. So we need to find that middle ground. And again, that's what I'm all about in a lot of policy, finding a middle ground and trying to look at issues not as binary, right or wrong, but some way to finding a medium that works for most people. The other point I do want to make on student debt is one way we improve things going forward is the federal government should not be making a profit in student lending. We got into the debt business after the last financial crisis, and we need to, it's good that the government's doing this. We started doing it because other lenders wouldn't. But when the government is lending money, we should be lending it much closer to the rate that it costs the government to provide that money, not profiting off our students and saying that they cannot go into bankruptcy to get rid of that student debt. It's just not fair. We need to do it better.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. This next question is from Sandra on Facebook. Sandra asks, what would you do for veterans that Zeldin failed to do?
Thank you, Sandra. Let me give a few answers to that. Number one, Lee Zeldin got elected and got himself on the Veterans Committee in the House. And after 2 years, he took himself off that to go to the Financial Services Committee so he could raise more money through the Financial Services Committee. Just that, giving up that representation was unfair to our veterans. There's so many veterans in this district that we should have a congressman who's there to represent them. And I have said many times, and I believe it, that we should, I'd like to be on the Veterans Committee, and once on the Veterans Committee, I want to stay on that committee the whole time that I'm there. Another point on veterans, and this is a current one. Actually, let me, before I get to that, I don't want to miss Northport. We need to make Northport better. We need to find a way to provide better healthcare services at Northport for our veterans and not do it by privatizing veteran healthcare. Zeldin's approach to privatization is the wrong one. The veteran system is superior overall for a reason, and it's because we have a huge budget and great people devoted to it. And if we start allowing for privatization, we will lose the resources that go to the veteran, to the vet itself, and to Northport. So we've got to improve what we provide. But the last thing on this question, and I think it's very, very topical, Donald Trump announced that he is going to end the National Guard service in June. That's providing relief for the COVID crisis. In New York, not just in New York, What he's doing by ending it in June is ending it for guardsmen 2 days before their benefits accrue. That is so grossly unfair to our servicemen. We've got to do better than that. And the New York delegation, for the most part, understands it. The New Jersey delegation, in its entirety, including all their Republicans, understand it. Yesterday, Tom Suozzi released a letter that he and Peter King led the signing of that includes most of the New York delegation. And it even includes not just Peter King, but Elise Stefanik, who's a huge Trump supporter like Lee Zeldin. But Zeldin wouldn't sign that letter. He would not stand up for our National Guardsmen. And it's not fair to the people in the Guard, and it's not fair to the people of our state who need the services. We're most impacted by this virus. And to take away the National Guard in June before the end of the year is just crazy public policy. And that's another thing that I would do better. I would be absolutely critical of the administration to do everything in my power to keep the Guard here.
Okay. This question is from Michael from Hampton Bays. This is the last question we have for this evening. Millions of Americans are out of work and have lost their employer-based health insurance. Most never thought they would be in this position. With so many people affected in this way, how will the new public perception potentially change our employer-based healthcare system? And that's from Michael.
Michael, that is such a great question, and I'm glad we got it in before the end of this town hall. Healthcare is a right. It's not a privilege. And it's something that most Democrats understand and are running on. And Joe Biden says it. Barack Obama said it. We've made great strides to improve what we had with the Affordable Care Act, the ACA. And Americans who have pre-existing conditions, who don't have employer health care, are now able to get insurance policies that they weren't able to get before at a reasonable cost level. And it's so important that we preserve the ACA in order for people to keep their coverage for pre-existing conditions. So I want to start with that. The real difference between what the Democrats are pushing for is healthcare, and what the Republicans are pushing for, taking away healthcare, cannot be emphasized enough. And I was on a debate with Lee Zeldin in 2018, and he was insisting that he's for coverage for pre-existing conditions as well. And it's just frankly not true when he says it, because he's for coverage, allowing people to get coverage and maybe mandating it, but not at an affordable cost level. When you allow insurers to charge anything they want for good policies, that's not making it available to everybody. So now to your question, this COVID crisis has shown us that the reliance on employer-based coverage only works as long as people are employed. When you lose your health care coverage, you are in trouble because you need to find a replacement. We have insurance exchanges set up that are supposed to be there for you to buy into, but they're only available at certain times of the year. Cuomo has opened up the availability, but not every governor's done that. Many have not. So again, we just see the need for improving the alternatives to employer-based healthcare. We also see people who lose their jobs for a period of time. They look at the insurance that's available on the exchanges and they say, well, that's nowhere near as good as my employer-based coverage. In prior situations of high unemployment, we had COBRA coverage available to everybody, but this one we don't. And I think Congress needs to legislate a way for people who've lost their jobs for some period of time to continue to be able to afford their COBRA to keep their employer-based coverage intact. So that's a big step we need to take. my guess is one of the things on people's minds is, does this mean we should move to a single payer system? There may be a point in time that works. I think for right now, we should focus on the ACA and improving it and adding a public option. And hopefully that public option, if it works well enough, competes with the insurance companies and forces down their prices, because they need to compete with the public option. It may be that this public option becomes the way to transition into a single payer based model. I don't know the answer to that. But we do have a basic understanding that now more so than ever as a country that people need health care, and we've got to find a way to get them access to it one way or another. So thank you again for that question, and to everybody who's asked questions tonight, and to everybody who's joined this town hall. And we lost a few people, but most of the Zoom people at least are still on the call, and I really appreciate you're giving us an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes on what was a great evening. Let me conclude by reminding people, because there wasn't a question about voting. I was hoping there would be one. That New York State sent all registered Democrats an absentee ballot application. Hopefully everyone has received theirs already. You should have it by now. If you don't, go get one. You have the right to vote by mail. You need to apply to receive an absentee ballot. You can download the form on our website, PariGershon.com, and there's a link that will take you to the form, and you can download it. You can then mail that form to the Board of Elections in Yaphank. You can scan it and email it to them. It's another way of getting it in. But get them that form, and they will send you an absentee ballot. Fill out the absentee ballot, sign it, and mail it in. And that guarantees your right to vote. As long as you vote, that's your right. Don't let COVID crisis beat you. You can vote in person on election day, but I don't know what it's going to be like out there. Vote by mail. We're giving you, we the government are giving you that opportunity. Take advantage of it. Exercise your right to vote. What makes America the great country that we are. So with that, let me conclude and say thank you. Thank you to Hannah for being our moderator. Thank you to my team for helping put this together. Thank you to everyone who asked your questions in advance. Thank you to everyone whose question was asked. If you have a question that wasn't gotten to, once again, you may email it to campaign@PariGershon.com, and I will try to get you an answer as quickly as possible. Thanks a lot. We'll be doing one more town hall before the primary in June. Bye-bye.